Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today, inshallah, we will be talking to Mr. Muazzam Mohammed, the CEO of Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad. We will be discussing different topics about the history, the foundation of the organization, its current standing, and its future strategies in order to shape the future of Islamic banking and finance, not only in Malaysia but in other countries, including the OIC member countries and beyond. So, Mr. Muazzam, first, I'd like to thank you very much for giving us the opportunity and sparing some of your time in order to talk to us about Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad.
Okay, welcome and thank you for your time.
OIC Today. Leaders of today, leaders of tomorrow.
Pioneering the Islamic banking and finance since the 1980s. When the bank was established as the first Islamic bank to be established in Malaysia. And Malaysia is the first country to implement Islamic banking. When we are talking about that, we would like to know about the main contributions over the years for Islamic banking and finance locally in Malaysia and to shape the future of the industry as a whole.
Yeah, thank you for that question. As we move forward, it's important also for us to understand where our roots are and what because that will, to us, is an indication of what the kind of expectation, that resting on our shoulders and in terms of the aspirations of the country. Because in Malaysia, for example, we are majority Muslim countries, and the need for an alternative to conventional riba-based banking started way back, even in the 50s and all that. And that's the reason why initially this Lembaga Tabung Haji was set up back in late 60s, 1969, I think, as the first Islamic financial institutions, actually, Lembaga Tabung Haji, to accept savings, people who want to go for Hajj and all that, and be able to invest that kind of saving in Sharia-approved kind of instruments. But it was in the 1980s, exactly 1980, that there was this symposium that was done among the scholars to look at the framework for an Islamic bank to be established in Malaysia. And then some research are done and all that, and it translated into Bank Islam established in 1983. We started with about 30 staff, and then not long after that, I think we grew to about 300 people, 4 branches and all that. Today, we are already about 144 branches strong throughout Malaysia. We've got more than 4,600 staff. And we've got, for example, facilities that will cover retail, cover small businesses, large corporates and all that. And we have been, being the first Islamic banks in Malaysia, there have been many firsts, basically, that we have achieved, obviously, other than being the first Islamic bank. We have also developed our capabilities, For example, back in 1992, we are also the first issuer, or we helped with the first issuance of Islamic Sukuk, basically, in 1992 in the world. So that is the first Sharia-approved sort of alternative to bonds that we helped to arrange for it. Shell MDS, that was back in 1992. And then with the capabilities that we have developed over the years, there's also a need for us to be able to sort of share this knowledge and experience with the other banks. The other banks in Malaysia at that time, and they were mainly conventional banks. Bank Islam established what we call this BMB Institute of Research and Training, for example. That now, later on, it becomes IPFIM, Islamic Banking Financial Institute of Malaysia. It's a training center, basically. Why I mentioned about BERT and later on it becomes IPFIM, because this is where the factory, I would say, that produces the Islamic finance professionals that until today, as where we are today, we started in 1983 with only Bank Islam. Now in Malaysia, there's about 26 Islamic banks and development financial institutions in total as it is today. And I would have to say that comes through from contribution from Bank Islam. Many of those people who work with Bank Islam has gotten experience and all that would have moved to other institutions and set up at the beginning was Islamic window in the other conventional banks that now become full-fledged Islamic banks. For example, 11 of them from full-fledged Islamic banks, and they were part of this the banking group, sort of banking group in a way, right? And then we've got another 10 the locally incorporated foreign banks, the likes of HSBC and Sanctity and all that. We've got 5 development financial institutions that are also now fully Sharia compliant in terms of their business and all that, right? But we didn't stop there in terms of our innovation. There's a few firsts that we have embarked on. For example, through our subsidiary Bambi Investment, we also became the first in the world to offer ESG Sharia and ESG compliant fund management, offering funds which is both ESG compliant, Sharia compliant. But what is more important is that we offer that through machine learning and artificial intelligence. The fund management is done by a set of rules and computers and all that, and we use big data that enable us to go through all sorts of financial and non-financial information about the investment universe that we have. So that is through our collaboration with this entity called Arabbanks. That was back in 2014 that we started that journey, and we continue to be the first offering that. And we also one of the founding members that started this integrated account platform that basically try to transform Islamic banks, Bank Islam especially, not just from being credit intermediation, but towards into investment intermediation and offering the investments to investors through online platforms and all that. In 2017, as you would have seen, you would have read, when Bank Negara launched this value-based intermediation principles applying to Islamic banks. Bank Islam is one of the early adopters and one of the committee of practitioners, we call it, and we embed it within our business model, I think from 2018 onwards, to get to where we are today, that we have VBI, value-based intermediation, being embedded within our business model and shaping in terms of where we move, yeah. Because basically at the end of the day, Sharia is still within our DNA and all that. But how do we now be able to share and translate it into something a bit more universal? Because I think that's very important for us to move forward, to be able to capture the bigger market, yeah, and without losing view of our heritage, where we came from.
Such an impressive actually journey,
Yeah.
Being the first mover
Yeah.
in many aspects and different parts of the industry, I would say. You can also highlight to us some of the significant differences between conventional and Islamic banking, because a lot of people they see it and okay, this one is based on interest, but this one also gets some returns. So
Correct.
what do we call that one?
Yeah.
So if you can signify the differences between Islamic banking and conventional banking.
I mean, to us, we feel honored because we knew upfront, when the bank was set up, it's not supposed to be the only bank that offer Islamic finance. It's almost akin to, I would put it, to going to a supermarket and try to find halal food. Rather than having a supermarket with a small section of halal food being offered. We want to build so that the supermarket itself is halal, and you probably have one small part which is non-halal, for example. That is the government's vision, and Islamic financial system needs to be the mainstream in Malaysia. So we knew that, and for that to happen, there needs to be more than just one player in the market, and that's why, like I mentioned to you, even in the beginning, Bank Islam was the one to set up these training institutions, to produce Islamic finance professionals and all that. And we are happy to see it, and hopefully Bank Negara's target to achieve 30%, more than 30% in terms of Islamic financial assets and all that. We are on track to realize that. But so the next question is that where do we move from there? Obviously, Bank Islam is already synonymous. We are true blue Islamic banks, people will take it for granted that whatever we offer would be Islamic Sharia compliant. But so are the products and services offered by the other Islamic banks that has started to come in market. I mentioned about 26 of them in total, right? So in terms of, it's no longer about, maybe in the first few years when we set up, the way how we go to the market to say that we are Sharia compliant, and that is our distinctive advantage. Now it's no longer, because there's other people that has that. So it's important now, Islamic financial industry as a whole, and also for Bank Islam, to start to show the values of it. So it's not just about the form of it anymore. I think in the past we used to focus a lot more on the form, that we have got Sharia compliance contracts and all that, right? But what I'm saying is that the value from the perspective of what we offer and the kind of impact that we give. That's why when we infuse this BBI within our DNA, it's meant for us to be able to reflect the higher outcomes or higher objectives of the Sharia, Maqasid Sharia of this, conducting our business in Islamic finance, Islamic financial systems. And it's not just about profit maximization. We're just not looking at customers or shareholders. We also need to look from the perspective of fair and equitable distribution. How do we share the prosperity with the bigger group? How do we empower our community among us? So these are the things now for Bank Islam as we move forward, that we want to be able to show it, to say that this is the beauty of Islamic finance, and it's not about just applying Islamic contracts in our offerings. Of course that is important. That goes without saying. So I'm not saying that is not important. That is important. Bank Islam is, Sharia compliant, Sharia principles. You do not have any doubt about it. But beyond that, what are we offering? So that's what I mentioned just now. So what do we want to be? We want to be the bank that advances prosperity for all. And when we say all here, it means that across different stakeholder spectrum, which is customers, our stakeholders, our customers, our employees, our regulators, and our shareholders, our community. And when we talk about for all, it's not just it's not just about profit maximization. It's also about preservation of the environment, for example, right? So that's very important. So the elements of ESG, the environmental, the social, the governance is all fully embedded within what we want to pursue, right? So as we move forward, that is the part where we need to consciously be able to demonstrate. And this is where, for example, that when we look at this, then we realize that traditional banking, we will have, for example, certain appetite. We will have, for example, certain segments that naturally we will be able to attract. But in the past, there's still certain segments that we may not have touched enough or given sufficient attention. And that's the reason why back in 2018, we started to push through our social finance agenda. When we talk about social finance, it's also looking at how do we use our financing facility, financial instruments to be able to support causes which is, that have social impact, not just financial return per se, but can give positive social impact, but ultimately can lead to economic returns overall. So we started to look at how do we go about doing it within the context of the traditional banking model that we have. So that's why one of the options that we put on the table and we're pushing forward in order to promote our social finance agenda is we set up this, what we call our Sadaqah House, that is meant to look at a different way for us to raise our capital and for us to be able to work in an ecosystem with the involvement of non-profit organizations, non-governmental organizations, for example, the change makers, the social impact organizations and all that, for us to be able to start to look at, give more focus to the underserved, the unserved. And the idea is that so that we can help to enable them from being the unserved to be into the mass market, and to be able to nurture them if they were unbankable before this, nurture them so that they can become bankable after a certain period of assistance, coaching, and development. And that's what we are now trying to achieve beyond the early days of just looking at Sharia compliance contracts and products.
So again, you are a first mover in this regard.
Correct.
As well.
Yeah.
And then it's really good and interesting to discuss the ideas of social finance and Islamic social finance, and how you are also pioneering this part of the industry. But now, specifically, if we can target the idea of fintech, and how it helps also now Islamic social finance and having a bank to take over this responsibility is something new. How do you get use of the fintech and its advancement? In the past few years, we have seen a lot of tremendous ideas utilizing the fintech to serve the society at large. So how do you combine these things?
So fintech plays an important role for us because in Bank Islam in general, like I mentioned just now, at the end of the day, we want to be the bank that advances prosperity for all. And in order for us to achieve that, we need to provide solutions that deliver value, meaning that it helps to either solve our customers' problem or solve the community's problem, or it serves their need. What do they really need and all that, right? And in achieving that, we put in focus the 6 areas that we put focus on, which is important to us. Before we can move to the area that you mentioned just now, the 6 building blocks, we call it 6 strategic objectives. We are very focused on sustainable prosperity. End of the day, I can talk about social finance and all that. We are a bank. There is a need for us to ensure that our financial position is strong, or capital is strong, or liquidity is strong, because these are the base. Without a very strong base, it's difficult for us to achieve all the aspirations that we want to do, all the good things that we want to do. So we put it very clear, sustainable prosperity, and Alhamdulillah, so far Bank Islam is one of the top achiever, I would say, from perspective of good credit quality, strong capital, strong liquidity, and all that. The other area which is important to us would be in terms of the culture, our organizational culture, our people, how do we behave, our mindset, that's important. So we put it as also an important thrust, values-based culture. The third component, which is also very important for us to be able to serve our customers' needs, is customer centricity, putting customer at the center and identify who they are, what do they need, how do we best serve them. Alright. The other area that I mentioned just now is not just about our customers and our shareholders, it's community empowerment, it's the community around us. How do we conduct our business, promote our business, that at the same time can include our community, being able to support them as well in us doing our business. So that's very important for us to be clear. And then it's also putting focus on the real economy, for real economic activity. So this is where, for example, we need to be able to assist the small entrepreneurs, the micro entrepreneurs, and all that, right? And then the last part will be the digitalization, coming back to what you mentioned just now. So when we talk about digitalization, technology is not just for the social finance, it's for the bank as a whole. Now, when we talk from the digitalization and fintech perspective, your question is that why is it important? We look at it from twofold. One is that because it's an enabler for us to create an ecosystem that we can get the various parties and constituents to come together on a single platform a lot more seamlessly, and without the the constraint of different physical and geographical boundaries and all that. I give you an example, because one of the things that we're trying to do in terms of financial inclusion and all that is to have ecosystem whereby you can have small entrepreneurs over there, you can have banks like us that can help to facilitate payments, provide financing and all that. We can have agencies that can help to do marketing and export for example, domestic products to be able to go overseas and all that, whatever it is. And you need technology to be able to do this digitalization. That's one thing. Ability to connect people in an ecosystem, and that will enable even the small players to be in. Without technology, if you look at it about 20 years ago, you will not be able to achieve this, right? Secondly, is that from the perspective of service delivery, for example, when we want to do certain projects, especially why in the past there's certain segments of the society are a bit underserved and all that, because in the past, 10-15 years ago, the only way for a bank, for example, to be able to service a customer is by having physical presence. And physical presence, to have it in remote area where there's not enough in terms of volume of potential business and customers and all that, it's difficult for you to justify to have that physical presence. But with technology, you can have that presence even though without having a physical branch there. But as long as you've got access to 3G, 4G and all that, we are able to service the segments no matter how rural they are. In the context of Malaysia, in terms of our internet penetration is really quite high, right? So we're using it from the perspective of being able to reach out the underserved and all that, and being able to bring them in by using technology. Now, the other important criteria is also technology now enables transparency. So coming back to our social finance agenda, for example, like we also do matching in a way that we raise funding and we channel it through our change makers to support certain projects, certain communities, certain entrepreneurship development program and all that. What happened is that even the contributors, the donors and all that, through technology, they will know exactly where their money goes to and what happens to the project that they wanted to support and all that. So that increases transparency, and with increased transparency, it builds confidence in the donors and all that, and it will help further, in terms of being able to raise additional funds and all that, whatever it is. So that's why digitalization, like I mentioned, even to the bank as a whole is important, and more so, like I mentioned just now, in helping us to promote our social finance agenda as well. That's the reason why for our Sadaqah House, for example, the way how we do our crowdfunding, we also use this electronic platform. It has got its own website that you can go in there. What projects are listed, who are the change makers. You can drill down to look at their progress and how much in terms of financial contribution is required and all that.
Okay, so from this point, Mr. Muazzam, I would like to go a little bit back but forward at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the beginning, you have contributed to preparing professionals.
Yeah.
Okay, now there is a new thing, which is the Islamic social finance, the fintech, the digitalization, and you have the foundation for all of that.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to ask you about the strategies, the future strategies of transferring this knowledge and experience and perhaps the business model that you have, not only in Malaysia, in other places.
Yeah.
Especially now, like you mentioned, digitalization makes it easier to reach different places without having a branch maybe in these countries or these destinations. So what are the strategies that you have in this regard, and perhaps what are the immediate destinations that you are going to?
Immediately, this is something initiative that we have embarked on only recently. For example, Sadaqah House, we set it up in January 2018. And in order to ensure that we can further accelerate the development of and being able to promote quickly the social finance agenda of Bank Islam, we set up Center for Social Finance back in January 2020 to make it as one core business function, I would say, for a Bank Islam. Typically, a banks would have their business banking, they would have their commercial banking, they would have their retail banking, treasury, capital markets, wholesale banking, and all that. We have Center for Social Finance, which is supposed to be a core function, a business function for the bank. Now, the focus that we put in for 2020 was in terms of coming up with the what I call in terms of the offering, products and solutions. So 1 year down the road, it's almost 1 year down the road from where we started. Alhamdulillah, we have got, for example, programs that would be suitable for end financing for wakaf property. I mean, people who want to buy property which is sitting on a wakaf asset, for example. We've got end financing for that. We've got a program to promote development of wakaf asset. Yeah, this building is a classic example whereby we were involved in development of a wakaf project, but beyond that, we now have facilities to be able to help to do development of wakaf properties. Especially when we talk about Malaysia, there's still a lot of unproductive wakaf assets, and these are the things that we want to be able to help to promote, to do. We've got even facilities when you talk about serving the underserved, right? Facilities to enable Asnaf to be able to buy or construct a house, for example. We will have that, right? And we have already launched in terms of our initiative where we work with state religious authorities, again in the context of Malaysia, because of the way how the structure is, whereby matters of zakat and wakaf and all these Islamic, social finance instruments are under the purview of the state religious council. We've got a program called iTekat, a microfinancing program that we work with state religious council to be able to help the small entrepreneurs that fall within the Asnaf category in their respective areas and be able to provide financing and development for them. And now we are coming up with our Bangkit microfinance program that we're going to work with other change makers, the NGOs and all that, using capital that we raise from the crowdfunding platform to assist really small micro entrepreneurs, people who could be selling food by the roadside, that kind of thing, and that's what we have in terms of our products and offerings. 2019, 2021, 2022 is the time that we start to offer this in a big scale. So in the immediate term, currently we are focusing on our domestic market, especially during this COVID time and all that. It's also important for us to be able to help in the economic recovery, and that's where we see there's potential to use social finance instrument during this time to really assist people to get back up, in terms of recovering from the effect of the COVID pandemic. But going into the future, we are ready to work with, for example, other institutions. For example, we've been talking to, for example, IDB. They're setting up their center in Kuala Lumpur, and in fact, we have been liaising with them, and we have been assisting to introduce, to take IDB to the relevant state Islamic religious councils, to look at what kind of programs and all that needs to be assisted. So obviously there's nothing formal yet between Bank Islam and IDB and all that, but these are things that as we go along that we can work with, because our idea is that when we work in terms of promoting social finance agenda, is always going to be in collaboration. There's no way for Bank Islam to do this alone. So collaboration that we have is that we are looking at is collaboration among a few other Islamic banks under the purview of IBIM, which is an Islamic Banking Association. Collaboration from the perspective of working together with the social impact organizations, not-for-profit organizations and all that. There's so many good ones out there that probably need the kind of financial backing and infrastructure that a bank like us have, and working together can really make a big difference for them. And also collaboration with other governmental agencies. For example, like I mentioned just now, the State Religious Council. And when we talk about the ecosystem that I mentioned just now, we need to bring in the relevant agencies that have got this mandate to, for example, to promote local businesses overseas and all that, or promote the halal economy and all that. So it's always through collaboration. And beyond our shores, obviously there's also ambition for us to move beyond our shores, but that is something that we will do once we have strengthened our positioning locally in terms of our offering and our collaboration.
That's again another impressive thing to hear, and especially if you started a collaboration with the IDB.
Yeah.
I'm sure going outside or beyond the
Inshallah.
borders of Malaysia would be an easier task because they have access to all the Islamic countries.
Correct, yeah.
But if we can come back to what you mentioned about the COVID-19. Now, I would like to discuss this COVID-19 from two perhaps aspects. The first of which is how did it impact the performance of Bank Islam, especially knowing that over the past years, the most recent was last year, your performance was really, really good.
Yeah.
The profit was kind of okay compared to the previous years. But suddenly this pandemic impacted the entire world, everyone, individuals, organizations, governments were impacted by it.
Yeah.
What was the share of Bank Islam from that one? And if you could also give us, because Bank Islam has faced a lot of crises before, financial crises, 1997, 1998, 2009, 2008,
Yeah.
and recently also, and perhaps this one.
Yeah.
Is there a kind of comparison or differentiation between this current one and the previous crises that you faced?
Yeah, okay. If we're to go back a few years, right? I mean, the Asian financial crisis back in 1998, it was a banking crisis, it was a credit crisis, and to a certain extent, Bank Islam was affected, but we felt that effect not immediately in 1998 and 1999. It's a bit delayed. It came to hit, I think, back in 2003 and all that, and that was when the bank had to recapitalize itself and sort of put in slightly different focus in terms of the where we put our exposure in and all that, and start to build, or rather rebuild, in terms of our governance structure, processes, policies and all that, right? And through that sort of learning from the lessons of the 1998 crisis and all that, and putting in this more robust infrastructure. And another crisis that we, globally, we had to go through a 2008 global financial crisis. So Alhamdulillah, because of the stronger footing that we put in there, we not as affected as some other banks in some other countries, obviously. I mean, for many of the banks in Malaysia, Alhamdulillah, we survived that period and all that. But we continue to strengthen our position in terms of capabilities, in terms of financial strength and all that. That when this thing came, and this is unprecedented, right? COVID, from a health issue, it became an economic crisis in a way, and the nature was different. So it's broad-based. 1998. 2008, it only affects certain segments. Here, it affects everybody. And rightly, as you pointed out, for us, we also feel the effect, because at the end of the day, we live in an economy, in an ecosystem. When most constituents in the economy, in the ecosystem are affected, we are also equally affected, right? But our main focus, and Alhamdulillah, when it happened, we are at one of our strongest position, I would say. At the start of the pandemic, our total capital ratio was well above 18%. Our liquidity ratios and all that, from liquidity coverage ratio, our net stable funding ratio was well above the minimum regulatory requirements. Our impact ratio was very, very good. Our impairment was only about 0.8%, which is even, I would say, twice better compared to the industry at 1.5% in terms of impact ratio. So we started the crisis period in a strong footing that enables us to assist our customers, because we realized that what's important for us to at this point in time is to find a way to assist our customers so that they are able to get through this difficult period, and give them sufficient breathing space and assistance so that they can rebuild their business and get out from this period, hopefully even stronger. So that has been the focus. And obviously in doing that, so that's where targeted moratorium came in, the restructuring, rescheduling are done and all that for all our customers. Of course, there's some financial impact to the bank. Obviously, when you allow restructuring and all that, this under this accounting concept, there's this called modification loss that would have to absorb, higher than before, due to customers' difficult and more challenging financial position. It means that our credit impairment provision will have to be higher. We need to have some buffers and all that, because not all of them will survive. Some of them may, face difficulty and exhibiting this significant increase in credit risk and all that, whatever it is, and it requires high impairment provision to be made. But Alhamdulillah, the bank continues to be profitable. Obviously, it's not at the trajectory that we were expecting without COVID. Obviously, things change completely. But it also presents an opportunity that we saw from our perspective of because certain trends, certain dynamics have changed. So there were certain things that we wanted to do that has just accelerated now. For example, when we look at the trends, in terms of the way the customers interact with us, our adoption of our digital channel and all that has gone up at multiple folds, way above what we initially projected and all that. So so there's opportunity for us to further accelerate, whatever that we already had in plan, and really further accelerate this thing, right? But the other thing is that it also presents an opportunity for us, again, like I mentioned just now, to offer this Islamic social finance as probably a solution to help address this situation that we're having now. And it's good to note that it's even acknowledged by the government because, for example, back in May, even the Prime Minister announced the launch of this IT card program, and Bank Islam was given the honor to be the first bank, and currently is still the only bank that offer this IT card microfinancing. So there is this realization to say that this is the beauty of Islamic finance, because we've got that social finance element that we've been championing it, and of course we want to put it out there in the market, and that's why following that will be our Bangkit microfinance that will further accelerate. So again, I think we put it in our agenda back in 2018. COVID came in and helped to sort of accelerate in terms of us moving this agenda to be hopefully more mainstream, inshallah, in our financial system.
The initiation of the innovation of things in Islamic banking.
Yeah.
Starting from the sukuk, the mudarabah, the musharaka. Now, all these things were not there.
Yeah, correct.
Like, let's say 20, 30 years ago. Nothing of that was there. But we know that Islam is a complete religion.
Correct.
There's nothing that you can add in.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did the idea develop, or how did the process go by to initiate a new thing? And a lot of new things are still coming up.
Yeah, exactly.
New innovations here and there, services that you're offering.
Yeah.
But again, when we're talking about Islamic banking professionals, perhaps they are more into the numbers, into the banking, the accounting part of it.
Correct. Yeah.
But you still need Sharia people to be with you.
Exactly.
So if you can explain to us, like, how did this process go by?
Yeah.
In order to bring something that no one can come later and say, oh, this is against Islam, or this is bid'ah, or this is this kind of thing.
I understand that very well. Like I mentioned, 15, 20 years ago, there's a lot of discussion from the perspective of form. So I know there were a lot of debates, among the intellectuals, and obviously I'm not one of them.
Definitely you are.
That talks about, this contract is allowed, this contract is not allowed, and all that. So there's a lot of discussion about the form. That probably at that time we were so sidetracked to say that is tawarruk allowed, or should it be ijara, and all that, whatever it is. So we were so sidetracked on that we forgot what is it trying to achieve at the end of the day. Going back to the question of maqasid Sharia. Okay, so what if we are so consumed with the contracts and all that, but when we come up with a product, it may not necessarily be aimed at addressing the higher objectives of Sharia. Is that the intention of Islamic finance? That needs to be that kind of way of us to reflect, right? And it's through this reflection that this VBI comes in value-based intermediation. Value-based intermediation came in with the fact that that kind of debate, that kind of discourse, which has been good, a lot of traction, there's a lot of opinions that have come out. There's a lot of things that now we can take away and we can use it. But we say that there's enough already in terms of the formula of what we can use. What do you want to use this formula for? That's what VBI is all about. So that's why now we say that, like I mentioned just now, our mission is to say that, we want to be able to give value, solutions that give value to our customers. So when we talk about value, it must be something that address what our customer need based on who they are, the channel that they prefer and all that we have. So we need to understand what do we need to come up with to satisfy the need of our customers at different stages of their lives, at different economic standing that they have and all that. So that's important. And that is putting our customer at the center. So that's why I mentioned just now, one of the strategic objectives that we have is customer centricity. It means that we need to start with having high customer empathy, putting ourselves in the shoes of our customers. And there's not just one customer, there's many customers. Different stages in life, different economic status, different objectives. Right? So we need to understand that. Then only we look at from the perspective, the kind of product services that we offer. Right? And it goes without saying, it must be Sharia compliant. I mean, we've got our Sharia council here. So when we talk about product services that we come up with, definitely needs to go through the gates. Our Sharia council, and we are very strict about it. We have very strong governance around it. Sharia approval, need to get board approval, need to get Negara approval and all that. So, it's a true blue Islamic bank from Sharia perspective. There's no doubt about it. But I think beyond that, when it comes to innovation, that is something that we want to promote. But where probably 15, 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, the way we think about innovation is we would be thinking about, should we have ijarah-based contract, in our product? Should we have mudarabah-based contract, musyarakah-based contract and all that, right? Now the question that we ask ourselves is that is just a base product. We say that could be the ingredient. Okay, what we want to look at now, that we want to address first, would be what flavor do you want it to have? What flavor do you want it to have? Meaning that if I were to meet my customer needs and wants and requirements, if I were to come up with a product or a group of products, what kind of features do the products need to have? We need to understand the features. What do we want to offer first? Then only, when we are very clear about what kind of features that we want, then only we look at what kind of Islamic contract which is appropriate to meet those features. So innovation still does happen, but it's not from the perspective of, I want to have musyarakah, I want to have mudarabah and all that. These are what I say would be the raw ingredients. But it's the cooking and the kind of taste and the kind of food that you want to give, that is where we will now use our innovation to say, okay, how much of this ingredient to use, how much of that ingredient to use. So that is the way how we think from perspective of innovation today when it comes to product services as compared to 10-15 years ago. But again, I will assure you, even in doing that process, the foundation is something that must be approved by our scholars.
How did that experience help you progress with Bank Islam until now you are leading the whole organization?
I like to reflect and put in perspective of my own personal experience, probably. I graduated accountancy from International Islamic University. And during the time that I studied there, it's between 1992 until 1996, right? That was the time when Islamic finance, Islamic banking were developing in Malaysia. I've got a lot of interest. I've done seminars and all that on Islamic banking scheme at that time, as a student.
I think the whole thing was still new.
Still new, and in fact, Professor Azmi Omar was my lecturer, and so many of them were my lecturers in universities and all that, and we had good discussions, good debate, research on that area. But obviously, I'm an accounting graduate. I went on to join KPMG straight away after that. And the other and at that time, obviously, when I did research, the only source of reference I had was Bank Islam. So that was my introduction to Bank Islam at that time. The other time that I came in to have some interaction with Bank Islam was I was at one time an auditor of Bank Islam. That was in years 2004, 5, and 6. But that was the time when Bank Islam was really in a challenging situation, like I mentioned just now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the aftershocks of the 1998 earthquake that was only felt back in 2003, 4, and 5 in Bank Islam. So that was my interaction with Bank Islam. I knew some of the directors, some of the people there, the operations and all that. But during that time, I was also mainly in doing advisory, audit, and then advisory in financial services and all that. Yeah. And when I joined in 2015, that was a situation whereby I came in, even though it shouldn't be something alien to me, but it was a different Bank Islam in 2018 compared to what I saw in 2006, because it went through that transformation journey. All right, as the CFO, and then obviously I think as fate would have it, I was made in 2018 as the CEO. But so in a way, I'm not really a thoroughbred banker in a way, but it's also a subject which is close to my heart. I studied about it. I understand sufficient enough for me to be able to audit it. Back in 2004, 2005. And however, in terms of my perspective, slightly different. Because I grew up in a consulting kind of environment and all that. Probably what I brought in was that from that I was able to contribute, I guess, to the institution was that in terms of my personal traits, very disciplined in terms of time management and all that. These are things very important as consultants and all that I'm able to infuse it over here to strengthen the culture, that kind of thing. From the perspective of service orientation, that's something quite similar, in consulting environment. In the consulting also, it gives me a good grasp of definitely finance, strategy, and also technology. Because when I was back as management consultant over there, the technology advisory group was also reporting to me, before I came to Bank Islam. So these are the things when I came in here, and when we went through that crossroad of value-based intermediation coming up, and not to say to change our course, but in terms of being able to further enhance who we are, our DNA, and put it to the fore, so that firstly our people appreciate it and realize the uniqueness and the beauty of what we have, and being able to communicate it to the world. Because other people needs to see this, right? We cannot be quiet, we cannot be shy about the good things that we have. Other people need to know about it, need to want to do it as well, follow our footsteps. Look back at what we did in 1983, that people following our footsteps. So these are the thing which is important. So those were the things that I brought in. Obviously, being able to polish it. Alhamdulillah, we've got a good young team, energetic people with. I always like to say this: what we have here are people whose heart are in the right place. They want to do the right thing. All we need to do is to be able to work together, show a path, a direction, what we want to do, where we want to go, and everybody just do it. Because everybody here is so committed that we want to be able to grow with this institution. Is such a big institution, unique institution. But the challenge for us is how do we turn something good into something great. So that is what we are all committed to achieve over here. And for me as well, I know that my time here is limited. But I always put in my mind, even from the first day I stepped foot in this organization, is that I want to be able to leave this organization better than when I joined it. Then it means that I would have contributed to it, and not the other way around. Because if it is the other way around, then rather than building it, I'm destroying it. So, na'udzubillah, that's not what I imagined would happen. Inshallah, hopefully, by the time we leave, it is a better place than when we joined. So, I think in terms of, the contribution and what would be my aspiration, and personally what would be my goal for the organization.
And there is no doubt that all the administrative skills, the service quality that you brought from the consultancy experience, definitely they are going to help to continue and enhance the transformation that you are pursuing. And like you said, there is a very good team, and I'm sure that good team, they have a very good leader that is leading the transformation of the organization. So at the end, I would like to thank you very much for the time and the knowledge that you have shared with us. And on behalf of my organization and OIC today also, I would like to wish you all the best, inshallah, in the coming months and years to mitigate all this fallout of the COVID-19 and continue forward, not only in Malaysia, other countries, inshallah, Islamic countries and beyond that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Oh, welcome. I thank you for your time as well.
OIC Today. Leaders of today, leaders of tomorrow.